Hiya, I hope everyone's doing good. This is a bit of a random one, but basically, I saw a stop and search happening yesterday, in which it seemed very clear to me that the police were using disproportionate violence on a really young black boy. And it made me really, really angry. And I've been thinking about what I can do. So I looked up some information about stop and searches, which I'm gonna read to you now, which will hopefully help you if you do see a stop and search because they are pretty common in London, to engage and understand what the rights are of the person. Because yeah, we need to hold the police to account because obviously they don't fucking hold themselves to account. And yeah, just knowing this information just makes you feel a lot more comfortable, I think, being in those exchanges. So, the first thing, and I think probably the most important, is that someone doesn't have to give their name and address to the police unless they're being charged. So, yeah, if they don't find anything and they aren't going to arrest you, you don't have to give them that information. So, I mean, if you want to, you can, but you don't have to, which I don't think they will tell you. If they are going to arrest you and charge you with something, you have the right to speak to a lawyer before being interviewed. And there's been cases where police have been reported to basically act like that's a more complicated process than it actually is. But you have the right to speak to a lawyer for free. Usually it shouldn't take that much longer than an hour. That seems to be the upwards limit to speak to a solicitor. Even if the police tell you it will be longer, you should just wait because you don't know what kind of stuff they're going to try and pin on you. And yeah, obviously they're a really fucked up institution. So there's two different kinds of stop and searches. The first is a normal stop and search, which is basically that they have to have reasonable grounds to want to carry it out. And reasonable grounds is you carrying a weapon or having some kind of drugs, something like that. I would question the police on what their grounds are. In the case that I observed yesterday, they said they'd received a call saying that there was some kind of black male outside an address who they thought could have a weapon. In the heat of the moment, I don't think I fully interrogated them on why they believed that. But also, even if that person had really valid grounds to think that this person had a weapon, past them just being black, I'm assuming that they arrived at the scene maybe 20 minutes after they got the call. So it's why are you assuming the same person's going to be there and then acting criminalizing them? You know what I mean? So yeah, just interrogate the reasonable grounds. And if that's fulfilled, so say they're looking for a weapon and they don't find a weapon, they then don't have the right to look for something else. There was a report, which I'll talk about in a minute, which basically found that a lot of police would continue to find reasons to be searching someone, and that's not legal. They're stopping you for one reason. If they don't find what they're looking for, that's it. The stop and search is done, and they have to let you go as quickly as possible if they don't find anything. So yeah, that's one. And then the second one is, it's a really ridiculous law, and it's really, I wish it was surprising, but it's pretty extreme. It's pretty typical of this government. Basically, it's called Section 60, and it has to be approved by an investigator or someone higher up in the police. But it means that the police have any right to stop anyone within a certain area for 48 hours without suspicion. They can just stop anyone. And it's basically meant to only be used in emergencies in cases where they think violence could break out. So yeah, ask if it is a Section 60 stop, why that's been approved in that area. Obviously the police officers they can't really fight with their superiors, but the public do have the right to know if that's being invoked and why. Because it's just such a ridiculous and extreme power that they can just search anyone they want, basically. So yeah, check the grounds or check if it's Section 60. So this report in 2020 was from the IOPC, which is the Independent Office for Police Conduct. And it basically just had a few recommendations for ways the police could improve their searches and things that weren't happening before. So the first point is the police can't just use handcuffs routinely. And they often tend to. I think yesterday, again, the use of handcuffs was completely unnecessary. They have to try to de-escalate the situation and get communication and consent from the person before using handcuffs. So ask if they tried to de-escalate or if handcuffs were instantly used, because they shouldn't be instantly used. The police also should be having, they've all got body cameras and they should be in use for the duration of a stop and search from the initial point of contact, so that if a complaint is launched, there can actually be a genuinely independent review. So check, have they got their cameras on? And if they haven't, why not? And explain to them that that's them not following due diligence. And that in itself could actually be grounds for a complaint if the person being stopped wants it to be. But yeah, they need to have their cameras on, basically. It's kind of like a weird one because obviously then it works to keep the identity of the person being searched. But unfortunately, like, I think it's probably the best way to make sure that there's some kind of objective perspective on what's happening. Yeah, another one, this is kind of more specific, but the smell of weed itself isn't reasonable grounds. So if someone's trying to stop and search you because they smell weed in the area, that's not legal. And you can just tell them that there's been quite a few cases where that's happened and that hasn't been a reasonable grounds to suspect someone, because it just means someone's smoking weed in the area. There's no proof that it's the person that they're speaking to. Yeah, there's a couple organizations that you could get in contact with, or if you're watching a stop and search unfold, you could just Google really quickly to see what their advice is. So the first one is Y-Stop, which apparently has an app where you can record stop and searches, and it's run by young people. And there's also Stopwatch. So they're good resources if you're like panicking in the moment. And also you can and you should probably get a record or receipt once the stop and search has been carried out, so that you then have a record of what happened, and that needs to contain the police officer's name, their number, their police station, what the reason was, if force was used, what they found or didn't find. And that just means that if you do decide to launch a complaint, then you have a record of what happened and they can't deny what happened. It also, I think, just means that they can't just do this without consequence. If you or the person that's getting stopped doesn't feel comfortable in the moment staying there and waiting for them to write this receipt up, because yesterday they were longing it out so much and they were actually kind of using us, the people that were questioning them, as an excuse to long it out and being like, oh, you're like, these boys just want to leave and you're here distracting us. So if the person does just want to leave, they can request a receipt for the stop and search within 3 months after. And I think if it's one where you have up to a year to request a receipt, but basically it doesn't have to be in that moment. If you just want to leave the situation, let the person know that they are still valid to request a receipt on the stop up to 3 months after it happened. I'm assuming by getting in touch with the police department of the police that stopped you. So yeah, I know this is quite a long video. I don't really expect many people to watch the full thing, but I just thought it would be important to try and get some of this information out there, because it's a really fucked up thing that's happening and it doesn't seem like there's accountability. And I think knowing this now, I would have approached the situation yesterday quite differently. But obviously in the moment, it was just really fucked up. So yeah, I hope it's helpful to some people.